and pawn endgames are the building blocks that support your understanding of all other endgames. Once you understand these endgames, you will know when it is good to trade all of your pieces and enter the endgame, and when you must do your best to avoid it. The most important of these king and pawn endgames to first learn is the king and pawn versus king endgame. Knowing the rules of this endgame will bring you many victories and can also help you draw the game being a pawn down. How can we tell if a position is a win or a draw? The key is the idea of opposition. In this position, both kings are battling for the key squares c6, d6, and e6. White wants to move the king to one of these squares to help advance the pawn, and of course, black will do anything possible to prevent this. White could advance the king to f6, but then black would play king d6 and win white's pawn. After d6, black must know exactly what to do in order to draw the game. When defending this position, remember to always keep your king directly in front of the pawn and to always stay on the same file as the pawn when retreating. The only move to draw the game for black is king d8. But let's see what happens if black plays any other king move. After king e8, king e6, and king d8, when the pawn advances to the 7th rank, the defender always wants the move to be with check. Notice that after d7, the black king is not in check and is forced off the promotion square after king c7. Now white plays king e7, protecting the promotion square and promoting the pawn on the next turn. If black tries to play king c8, king e6, and king d8, white advances the pawn to the 7th rank, once again, without check. Black's king is forced away from the promotion square after king c7, and king e7, black once again loses. The only move that saves the game for black is moving straight back and staying on the same file as the passed pawn with king d8. After king e6, black gains the opposition with king e8. If white moves the king away, black will immediately move the king in front of the passed pawn and move back and forth on the same file as the pawn. After d7 check, the pawn advances to the 7th rank with check, which means that black's king can move in front of the pawn and block it with king d8. If white moves the king away from the pawn, black simply captures it. So after king d6, the position is a stalemate. Let's take a look at another example. In this position, white has only one winning move. In order to win this king and pawn endgame, you want your king to be in front of the passed pawn. White takes the opposition with king e5. White has the opposition because the kings directly oppose each other with one square between them, and it is not white's turn. Since black has to move, white is going to gain one of the key squares, d6, e6, or f6. If black plays king d7, white's king will advance to f6. If black plays king e8, white will play king e6. And if black plays king f7, black's king is given up protection of d6, so white takes over that square with king d6. If black now plays king f6, black now has the horizontal opposition, as there is an odd number of squares between the two kings, and it is not black to move. Although black now has opposition, it doesn't stop white from simply marching the pawn up the board with e5 check. If black's king doesn't move to f7 right away, white will simply march the pawn up the board. And after king f7, white takes over opposition with king d7. White's king now protects the 3 squares the pawn will use on the path to promoting into a queen, so black loses this endgame. Instead of king f6, black could have tried to control the promotion square by playing king e8. White now wins by gaining opposition once again with king e6. And after king d8, black's king gives up control of f7, so white takes it with king f7. After king d7, white's pawn marches up the board with e5. And after king d8, e6, king c7, e7. As we have seen, gaining opposition allows the attacker to take over critical squares to promote the pawn, and opposition for the defender usually prevents the attacker from making any progress. There are some cases when gaining direct opposition does not work. Let's take a look. In this position, white is threatening to take opposition with king d6. Although black can gain opposition with king d7, black is still losing. It doesn't matter which side has opposition if the side with the pawn has a square to advance. After d4, white takes over the opposition and will win the endgame with proper technique. Here is another position where opposition does not save the defender. After king d8, even though the defender has opposition, if the side with the pawn can get the king on any of the 3 squares in front of the pawn on the 6th rank, in this case c6, d6, or e6, the side with the pawn will win no matter which side has opposition. This is because white can force the black king off the promotion square at the right moment. After king e6 and king e8, white advances the pawn with d6. And after king d8, notice white is able to advance the pawn to the 7th rank without check after d7. This means black's king is forced off the promotion square. After king c7 and king e7, white will win the game. Let's take a look at one last example. When the side with the pawn is left with a rook pawn, opposition does not help. Once the defender's king is able to control the promotion square, the game is drawn, as the king will simply move back and forth and never leave the corner of the board. After king a6, white has direct opposition, but notice that after king b8, opposition did not give the king a key square to use to move forward and escort the pawn, which is the point of opposition. After king b6, king a8, a6, king b8, a7 check, king a8, king a6, black draws the game with stalemate. Direct opposition can be a tricky idea to learn, but once you understand it, you'll be winning or drawing games without a second thought. Now it's your turn to practice direct opposition.